The land of Judah was parched. Fields that once overflowed with fertility now stretched in silence, cracked by the absence of rain and the cry of hunger. In Bethlehem, the city of bread, no grain was to be found. Families gathered their small reserves, and the eyes of children reflected a haunting emptiness caused by scarcity. The people murmured, pleaded in prayer, and fasted, yet help seemed distant. Famine was the decree of those dark days, and many sought refuge in distant lands. In this setting, Elimelech, a man of Bethlehem in Judah, made a decision that would transform the fate of his household. With his wife Naomi and their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, he left his homeland and journeyed to the plains of Moab, a foreign nation of another people and other gods. It was an escape from famine, but also a step away from the inheritance of the Lord. Upon arriving in Moab, the family found refuge and food. At first, the new home seemed promising. Bread returned to the table, and the sons, now grown men, married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. The years passed, but with them came tragedy. First, Elimelech fell ill, and far from his land died, leaving Naomi a widow, a foreigner and destitute. The pain did not stop there. About 10 years later, her 2 sons also died. Grief fell upon the household, heavy and merciless. Naomi, now without husband or sons, looked at Orpah and Ruth with eyes marked by affliction. 3 women bound by loss, without inheritance, without descendants, without direction. Then Naomi heard news that the Lord had visited his people with bread. Judah breathed again. The land, abandoned in the time of hardship, flourished once more. And Naomi, broken yet still alive, decided to return. She rose to leave the land of Moab. Her daughters-in-law walked with her for part of the way. On the road, Naomi stopped, turned to Orpah and Ruth, and said, "Return, my daughters. Why would you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, for there is no more hope for me. The hand of the Lord has turned against me." She blessed them and wept. It was time to part. Orpah, in tears, kissed Naomi and went back. But Ruth remained steadfast. She held her mother-in-law firmly. Her eyes did not waver, and her words came forth like an unshakable stone. "Do not urge me to leave you, or to turn back from following you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord deal with me ever so severely if anything but death separates you and me." Faced with such a declaration, Naomi fell silent. They walked on in silence toward Bethlehem. 2 widows marked by sorrow, facing the winds of uncertainty. Their arrival caused a stir. The women of the city asked, "Is this Naomi?" She answered with bitterness, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has afflicted me?" They arrived at the time of the barley harvest. The fields were full of grain, but Naomi saw only ashes, not abundance. Yet at her side walked a foreigner, a woman who had left everything out of loyalty. Ruth was now part of her story and would, by divine providence, become the key to a new chapter. There was no feast, no wealth, only 2 women upheld by an unspoken promise, the certainty that even in times of grief and emptiness, the God of Israel does not abandon those who turn to him. Naomi's lament still echoed, but in the deserts of the soul, God was beginning to plant hope. The chapter of departure was closing, and a new narrative was about to be born. Ruth the Moabite was at its center. The sun was already rising over Bethlehem when Ruth, moved by duty and courage, decided to go into the fields to glean. There was no other means of sustenance. A widow, a foreigner, without property and without name, she knew that only her initiative could bring bread for herself and Naomi. In the law of Israel, the Lord had commanded that the remnants of the harvest be left for the poor. the orphans, and the widows. It was a gesture of divine justice in a land marked by inequality. Ruth clung to this opportunity of mercy and, with humility, set out to gather food. With each step among the sheaves, she bent down, picked up the stalks left behind, and satisfied her hunger with labor. Without realizing it, her steps led her to the field of a man named Boaz. Boaz was a man of prestige, a relative of Elimelech, Naomi's late husband, God-fearing, honored by the elders, a landowner, and of good reputation. When he came to the fields to inspect the harvest, he noticed a woman who stood out among those working on the edges. Ruth's attitude, dedicated, humble, and tireless, caught his attention. "Whose young woman is this?" he asked the overseer. "She is the Moabite who returned with Naomi from Moab. She asked to glean behind the reapers, and she has been here since early morning, hardly stopping at all," replied the foreman. Boaz approached. His eyes did not measure her by her origin, but by her perseverance. With kindness, he said, "Do not go to glean in another field. Stay here with my servant girls. My men have already been instructed not to bother you, and when you are thirsty, drink from the water that my servants draw." Ruth bowed down, her face to the ground. "How have I found favor in your eyes, since I am a foreigner?" Boaz answered with tenderness and firmness, "I have heard all that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband and how you left your father, your mother, and the land of your birth to come to a people you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your work, and may your reward be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge." In those words, Ruth was not only receiving kindness, she was receiving identity, no longer as a Moabite, but as a daughter sheltered under the wings of the Most High. At mealtime, Boaz ordered that she be called to eat with his workers. Ruth sat among the reapers, and they gave her bread, wine, and roasted grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and even saved what was left over. At the end of the day, she returned carrying nearly an ephah of barley, about 20 kilograms, an extraordinary harvest for a woman alone. When Naomi saw her, she was astonished. "Where did you glean today? Blessed be the one who took notice of you." Ruth spoke of Boaz. The name slipped from her lips without fully realizing its significance, but when Naomi heard it, her eyes lit up. "Blessed be he of the Lord, who has not ceased to show kindness to the living and the dead. This man is our close relative, one of our kinsman redeemers." In the word redeemer lay a hidden ancient hope. The law of Moses declared that if a man died without leaving children, a close relative could marry the widow to raise up offspring in the name of the deceased. It was not merely marriage, it was restoration, dignity, redemption. Ruth continued gleaning in Boaz's fields throughout the barley and wheat harvests. She went out at dawn and returned at dusk, sustaining the household with her hands and silently nurturing hope. Among the stalks she gathered, she did not yet realize that she was harvesting something far greater. She was harvesting destiny. Boaz, for his part, observed her, not only her quiet beauty or her strength at work, but her character. She did not seek after young men, nor easy paths. She honored her mother-in-law, the faith and the precepts of Israel, and this deeply pleased Boaz's heart. God was beginning to intertwine their stories. The harvest was only the beginning. While the people rejoiced in the abundance of the fields, a divine plot was unfolding among the sheaves and promises. Naomi, who once called herself bitter, was beginning to taste another flavor, the hope that blossoms in the field where faithfulness meets favor. Ruth had arrived empty-handed. Now her arms were full, yet she did not know that the most precious gift was yet to come. For her Redeemer not only gave her sustenance, he carried within him the key to her redemption. Thus, with steady steps and eyes lifted upward, Ruth was no longer just a foreigner. She was becoming part of the story God would write with honor, legacy, and restoration. The harvest season ended. The once green fields lay bare, but the barns overflowed. Boaz, like any good landowner, went to the threshing floor, the place where the grain was threshed, and separated from the chaff, to inspect the fruit of his labor and ensure the security of the produce. It was a night of work, but also of contemplation under the stars. In the simplicity of the home where she lived with Naomi, Ruth listened carefully to her mother-in-law's words. The elderly woman, who once called herself bitter, now began to see glimpses of a divine plan taking shape before her eyes. With wisdom and courage, she counseled Ruth, "My daughter, I must seek a secure future for you, that it may go well with you. Behold, Boaz is our relative with whose servant girls you have been. Tonight he will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. Wash yourself, anoint yourself, put on your best garments, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking." Naomi's words were not trivial. They were a call to action, a bold proposal, but one upheld by the law. Ruth, as a widow, had the right to claim redemption, and Boaz, as a kinsman redeemer, could restore her name and her family's inheritance. But this would require faith, courage, and complete surrender to the ways of the Lord. That very night, Ruth obeyed her mother-in-law's instructions and quietly went down to the threshing floor. Boaz had already eaten and drunk, and now lay resting beside the heap of grain. The night was calm, lit only by the stars. Unnoticed, Ruth approached, uncovered Boaz's feet, and lay down there in a gesture of submission, according to tradition. At midnight, Boaz awoke, startled, and realized a woman was lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked with caution and surprise. Ruth replied with firmness and sweetness, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over me, for you are my redeemer." It was not merely a request for help, but a plea for covenant. Ruth was offering herself in marriage according to the Levitical law, so that the name of her late husband might be preserved and his inheritance not erased in Israel. Boaz, a man of integrity and righteousness, once again recognized the worth of that young woman. "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter. Your last act of kindness is greater than the first, because you did not run after young men, whether rich or poor. Now do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask, for everyone in the city knows that you are a virtuous woman." However, Boaz revealed a crucial point. There was a nearer relative who, by law, had the first right to redeem. Still, Boaz would not avoid his responsibility. He would fulfill everything with justice, within the law and in faith. "Stay here tonight," he said, "and in the morning, if he will redeem you, let him redeem. But if he does not wish to redeem you, as surely as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie here until morning." Ruth remained there until daybreak, rising before anyone could recognize her. Out of respect, Boaz asked her to keep her presence at the threshing floor secret, and before sending her away, he filled her shawl with 6 measures of barley, a symbolic yet generous gift. She returned home with her arms full and her heart overflowing with hope. When she arrived, Naomi was waiting, her eyes shining with expectation as she listened to the account of the night. Ruth told her every detail, and Naomi, with the wisdom of one who knew the ways of life, said, "Sit still, my daughter, until you know how this matter will turn out, for that man will not rest until he has settled it today." The seed had been sown. Now it was time to wait, but not with anxiety. It was the waiting of one who knows that faithfulness always bears fruit. The Moabite, who had come as a widow and a foreigner, now stood at the center of an act of redemption. Boaz, the righteous, would move forward, and heaven was watching every step. That night, among straw and grain, a silent cry was lifted, not for ambition, but for legacy, not for lack, but for purpose. The plea for redemption had been spoken, and Ruth's story was about to open a new chapter, not of loss, but of promise fulfilled. The sun rose over Bethlehem, bringing with it the expectation of resolution. Ruth waited in silence, trusting not only in Boaz, but in the God under whose wings she had sought refuge. Boaz, for his part, did not delay. As soon as morning came, he went to the city gate, the place where cases were decided, covenants made, and witnesses gathered. He sat among the elders and waited for the closer relative, the one who, by law, had the right to redeem Elimelech's inheritance. When the man passed by, Boaz called him, "Friend, come and sit here." He sat down, and soon 10 elders gathered, official witnesses. The scene was set. The future of Ruth, Naomi, and Elimelech's lineage would be decided there, in the sight of all. Boaz explained, "Naomi, who has returned from the land of Moab, is selling the portion of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should inform you, saying, buy it in the presence of those seated here. If you wish to redeem it, but if not, declare it to me that I may know." The man replied, "I will redeem it." But Boaz clarified the condition. "On the day you acquire the field from Naomi's hand, you must also take Ruth, the Moabitess, the widow of the deceased, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance." At this, the relative drew back. "I cannot redeem it, lest I endanger my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself." The decision was confirmed by an ancient custom. The man took off his sandal and handed it to Boaz as a sign that he was renouncing his right. Before the elders and all the people, Boaz declared with a firm voice, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. Moreover, I take Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, as my wife, to raise up the name of the deceased upon his inheritance." And the people gathered at the city gate responded with blessings. "May the woman who comes into your house be like Rachel and Leah, who together built the house of Israel, and may your descendants be abundant in Ephrathah and renowned in Bethlehem." That union, born out of sorrow and obedience, was now exalted as a sign of restoration. Boaz took Ruth as his wife, not out of pity, but as the fulfillment of a divine design. The Lord granted her conception. The womb, once marked by grief, now carried life. Ruth, the Moabite, became a mother in Israel. From their marriage, a son was born, not just a child, but a link between the redemption of a family and the promise of a people. The women of the city rejoiced with Naomi. "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer. May his name be renowned in Israel. He will restore your soul and sustain you in your old age." The boy was placed in Naomi's arms, and she cared for him as her own grandson. The one who once said, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara," now cradled the future in her embrace. They named the boy Obed. He would be the father of Jesse, who in turn would be the father of David, and from David would come the Messiah. The narrative of Ruth concluded where many stories only begin, with the birth of a child. But the name of that boy would echo through generations. The Moabite, the widow, the foreigner, was now part of the royal lineage. From her faithfulness sprang the line of the king. Redemption was confirmed not only through marriage, but through a name, a legacy, a new beginning. Through harvests, losses, and courage, God wrote a story that would span centuries. Boaz, the man of integrity, and Ruth, the faithful, became the root of an endless promise. Obed grew up in the streets of Bethlehem, surrounded by Naomi's care, Ruth's affection, and Boaz's honor. At first glance, he seemed like just another child among many. But within him lay the weight of a quiet miracle, the testimony of a story that began long before, in the fields of Moab, amidst the tears of a widow and the determined steps of a foreigner. In this setting, glory was hidden in simple gestures: the decision to remain, a humble harvest, a night at the threshing floor, a redemption sealed at the city gates. To the eyes of the Most High, it was more than routine. It was the fulfillment of a holy purpose, part of a thread weaving destinies into something greater than land, bread, and lineage. Obed grew and fathered Jesse. Jesse fathered David, the shepherd who would become king, chosen according to God's heart. From David's line, centuries later, would come the Anointed One, the promised son, long awaited by prophets and generations. Ruth, the Moabite, was grafted not only into Israel, but into the very root of messianic hope. The woman who once left behind her homeland, her people and her gods, now became part of the eternal promise of salvation. Her journey, marked by loss and faith, became a foundation for the redemption of all nations. The book of Ruth closes with a genealogy, a sequence of names that to some may seem like mere record, but each one is a living stone in an eternal edifice. From Perez to David, the lineage flows as a path of redemption, from Judah to Bethlehem, from sorrow to kingship, from mourning to praise. The greatest secret is revealed in this ending. True redemption is not merely about reclaiming land, but about restoring a name. Ruth was not only redeemed by Boaz, she was redeemed by God himself. Her story is a window into the heart of the Almighty, who welcomes the foreigner, honors quiet faithfulness, transforms widows into mothers of kings, and writes promises out of the improbable. Not a single tear of Ruth went unnoticed. Not a single act of faith unanswered, not a single harvest gleaned in humility overlooked in heaven. When man sees the ordinary, God sees the eternal. Ruth was not merely the great-grandmother of David, she was the silent reflection pointing to the Messiah. Her story lives on in every act of loyalty, in every choice of faith, in every heart that, like hers, declares, "Your people shall be my people, and your God my God." Thus the foreigner became an heir, the widow became a root, and the mother of Obed became an eternal symbol of the grace that renews and sows seeds which blossom into salvation. If you made it this far, write Amen in the comments. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any content. Click on the card on your screen and watch our next video. May the legacy of Ruth inspire hearts to trust, even when all seems lost. Stay in God's peace. See you in the next video.